Clank in Space. This is a game that has probably an unnecessarily baroque punctuation in the title, but other than that, if the game is good, well, we'll be patient with that punctuation. This is a deck building game which combines a deck building engine with a board, and that is something you don't see in many deck building games. We have a few acres of snow and a couple of other ones, but it's not the most common incarnation of the deck building idea. However, it is also what you had in the first Clank. It was simply called Clank, had a fantasy setting. I haven't played it, so I won't be able to compare. And this one is based on the same system and has a sci-fi setting. The idea is still that you are entering a hostile space, in this case a mysterious starship that is controlled by the evil Lord Eradicus, and you're trying to steal artifacts from him. Which of course begs the question of, like, is he really evil? But we are the thieves. Maybe he's just protecting his stuff. How about that perspective? Anyways, the deck building adventure. As I said, it uses a board, and that is the board. Ouch, I have to say, that is one overwhelming board. Very busy at the beginning. I wasn't a big fan. After playing the game, I learned to not to love it, but to be okay with it. Very busy, not easy on the eyes, but when you become familiar with it, functional, overall functional. Also, it is a puzzle board. It's made of different pieces that you combine together. You can probably see there from the different pieces, and they are double-sided. By using different sides of all these pieces, you'll be able to create different combinations and different layouts. The players basically will enter from that area there. They will move from location to location. They will interact with the locations. For example, when you get here, you get to get one of these tokens. Most of them are good stuff. Will give you good stuff like space dollars. They're called credits, but I prefer to call them space dollars. Other types of advantages represented by symbols and so on and so forth. Those are called the minor secrets, these tokens here. You may also enter a space with a major secret, and that will give you either bigger penalties or bigger advantages. And you have a lot of different things. The back of the rulebook will tell you what these things are. When you enter an area with the heart, you can recover health. You will take damage during the game. When you enter an area with these red lines, you have to stop for the turn. There are the ways of traveling faster, like using this special lift here if you get a technology that lets you do so. Using the teleporter if, again, you can get the technology to do so. The general idea is that by using different means of transportation, you will move from connection to connection until you reach one of these areas here containing an artifact. Incidentally, you see these symbols here, they represent an area that is locked until you figure out the secret code. You hacked into the code. Each player has 2 cubes of their own color. During the game, when you enter an area that has one of those green boxes, you place one of your cubes there, and then there can only be one per cube, and then you go and place the second one, and when both cubes are on the board in those green areas, then you can move into this other part of the ship, which contains the artifact. The artifacts, you can take one and only one. When you get one, you cannot drop it, you cannot exchange it, you cannot get another one, you're stuck with it. It will give you a number of victory points at the end. This one, for example, here the Game Boy is worth 5 victory points. The fake dog is worth 20 victory points. So you can go deeper into the starship and get better stuff that is worth a lot more points, but then you need to be able to make it back alive. So after you get the artifact, you are trying to make your way across the board here to the escape pods. As I said, you will take damage. When you take damage, it will be recorded on that track there. If your damage ever goes to the skull symbol, you're dead, or say you're knocked out. If you're knocked out here in the final section of the board, your confederates, your friends, associate, allies, whatever they are, they will get you out of the starship, and you still get to score points. If you die out out of that area, far from it, then you cannot count points. You will not be able to compete for victory. Ideally, you will make it alive to one of the escape pods with an artifact, in which case you take the escape pod, which is also worth 20 victory points, you remove your piece from the game, and you're good. You will score points at the end of the game. You also get to attack the other opponents. But before we explain that, before I tell you that story, I need to tell you this story, which is how do you actually play, what you do during the turn, how do you perform actions. I'm glad you asked. You start with this deck of very weak cards that have Axe, Access. There is also another one that I want to show you first, which is the Scramble, and then the Stumble. Now, several effects will add Clank to the board. When you get a Clank effect, for example, when you get a Stumble card in your hand, you place a cube from your personal pool, cube of your color, in that area. Later, those cubes will get in trouble. The more there, the worse things are for you. You're trying to get them out of the board using game effects. So you will have a hand of cards, and you will use the cards to move, to buy the cards, and or to fight and activate other effects. Each symbol that you have here gives you a movement point. Now, to move on the board across a regular connection costs 1 movement point. Some require 2 movement points, as explained that, shown by that symbol, so you will need to multiple boot or food symbols. Cards that you will acquire will also give you laser swords during the game. Laser swords are used to defeat enemies. When you're moving in a connection that has the enemy symbol, some connections have 1, some have 2, some have 0, of course. When you move in a connection with enemy symbols, each laser sword that you're playing that turn cancels one of the enemy symbols. Each enemy symbol that you cannot cancel will give you a damage. For example, I have this card in my hand this turn, and I play this turn to move across that connection. I get to take that minor token, and I don't suffer any damage. If I only use 1 sword, then I take 1 damage, and so on and so forth. This is the market. By the way, this is the market. When you get there, you can spend space dollars. I know they're called credits, but I prefer to call them space dollars, to buy these tokens from the market. They may heal you. They may give you victory points and access to certain cards. They may give you access to the fast elevator or to the teleporter. They all cost 7 space dollars, which is pretty expensive. Also, space dollars are victory points at the end of the game. So it's a big commitment, but those items are very valuable. So pretty much, you're playing your hand of cards to move, or to fight, and or to acquire new cards. The new cards that you will add to your deck, otherwise, what kind of deck builder would this be? They come from these 2 areas. You have an adventure deck from which you will draw 6 cards that are available for purchase and or for murder, for destruction. If you can spend these blue points here from your cards to buy cards, and the cost is there. So for example, to buy this card, I need to produce 3 points here from these numbers here on this section of the card. To buy this one, 3 and 3, and so on and so forth. Some cards in the bottom right corner don't have a cost, but have a number of swords, and those are cards that you kill with your swords. So again, you produce sword symbols to destroy those. For example, if in my hand I have these cards, I could kill that enemy there, getting the corresponding effect, which is I put a Clank in the area that I showed you, but I get 2 space dollars, and then I discard it. Doesn't go in my personal pile. And or I could spend my four points here to buy, for example, this card, or to buy this card, and so on and so forth. When you buy a card, this area is not refilled immediately. It will be refilled at the end of the game. There's also another area that you can use to buy points, and this is a more predictable area. Again, these cards are coming out from this deck, so you don't know what you get, and you don't get upset. We'll talk about that later. But you also have these four things. These are three cards that come in large decks. You can always buy them. This one pretty much grants you power to buy stuff and to move. This one a modest power to buy stuff, but a better power to slice enemies. And this one gives you victory points at the end of the game. This one, the Goblin, Goblin. The goblin, the mother of the goblins, is always pregnant, so the card stays there. You can always, if you can produce 2 swords, choose to use them to defeat that guy, and then you're simply gaining a point there. It's never discarded. However, there are the game effects that will flip it to the other side, giving you a different standing, potentially infinite monster. So you buy cards probably mainly to the adventure area if you're doing good, because these cards are better than the basic ones. And at the end of the turn, you will refill the slots that have been left open there. And when you refill them, you simply draw cards. Draw cards from the deck. However, some cards have this symbol here. If at least one of them was drawn, then Lord Erraticus, represented by that token there, gets really, really mad. What you do, Lord Erraticus has a bag that only contains black cubes at the end of the game. Can you see them? Probably not, because they're black at the bottom of a dark bag. When that symbol shows from a card that you just drew from the adventure deck, you grab all the cubes that were in the Clank area, you dump them in the bag, which I gloriously failed to do, such a simple task. For such a simple mind like mine, you put them in the bag, shake it up, and then draw a number of cards equal to the number of cubes that you see in the space where Lord Erraticus presently is. Several effects will move Lord Erraticus up during the game. For example, when a player places both of their code cubes on the board, he goes up by 1. When somebody steals an artifact, he's mad and goes up by 1, and so on and so forth. When it goes high enough, you take this cube here that pretty much in the tradition of The Empire Strikes Back, the evil guy starts calling bounty hunters. You place the red cube there, and when Lord Erraticus attacks, because his symbol shows in a card, you also take with the other Clank cubes the bounty hunters cubes, and you place them in here. Shake, draw again the number that you see in the space where Lord Erraticus is right now. Right now, for example, we draw 4 cubes. And for each cube that you draw that belongs to a player, that player takes a hit. For example, if this is the draw, then orange player takes 2 hits. The black cubes are set aside, and that means that the blue cubes that don't do anything will be fewer and fewer in the bag. So the chances that Lord Erraticus will draw cubes belonging to the player will increase over time. Each hit again is recorded here, and every time that we draw a bounty hunter, the bounty hunter is not set aside. It goes after it hits everybody. Every player takes a hit from a bounty hunter, and then it gets to the Clank space. So those guys keep coming back, and they can be really dangerous. Remember when I said that a player that is knocked out or that leaves still gets to do something, gets to attack other players? Because get this, once a player is knocked out or leaves the ship using an escape pod, the player is technically out of the game, but when it is their turn, they grab the bag and they ignore everything else. They simply draw a number of cubes. That is pretty much Nolo Deraticus is really mad because somebody left, or really excited because somebody died, and starts attacking more often. In a two-player game, when a player is knocked out, that player will draw 6 cubes every time, regardless of any other things. In the standard game with more than 2 players, 4 cubes. But that pretty much means that when a player is knocked out or leaves the board, the final phase of the game has been triggered. People will frantically start running here to make it out of here, so that at least they don't get killed. They don't get killed before they're close to the escape pod. Ideally, they want to get these 20 points. Less ideally, they want to make it so at least they count the points that they gain. Even less ideally, they don't score any points and they're out of the game. So at the end, the players that made it out alive, or that at least they were dragged out by their friends, will get to count victory points, and those points will come from the space dollars that they have accumulated from several cards that have victory points printed on them, from tokens that they have collected during the game, such as the escape pod, such as the artifacts, and so on and so forth. And at the point, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. I like this game quite a bit. Yes, the board, not my favorite part of the game, but it grows on you. Or maybe the dislike that you have at the beginning when you're shocked by seeing that net of lines will fade away as the gameplay and the joy of the gameplay kicks in. Other components are very well done though. You may have noticed some of the cards, and the more you play, the more you'll notice that there are so many jokes, so many playful references to sci-fi, especially to Star Wars and to Star Trek mainly, but also to other things like Chronicles of Riddick, and other things that let you the joy of discovering. And that to me is an added value. I mean, when you play Munchkin, seeing those visual jokes is pretty much the best thing of the game. It's almost all that there is, really. Here, the game is pretty solid, and on top of that, there is that funny element, which again is also visually interesting, is also visually pleasant. Even if you did not get the references, I don't know how you could, but if you were not getting the references, those components still look good. But gameplay is the thing. Gameplay is what we want to enjoy the most when we are playing a game. And gameplay here is very fun. Speaking of the deck building element specifically, what I like very much, which differentiates this game from so many other deck building systems, is that you have a branching tree of opportunities from the very beginning. There are just so many games where you start with cards that let you buy stuff and cards that potentially let you do something but don't really, because they're just so weak. So your strategy is you use your money to buy more money, and you use that more money to buy more money. At a certain point you start adding more stuff, but it's a pretty narrow beginning as you need to build your money engine. Here, what I find very interesting is that actually from the beginning you can buy cards that let you do different things, which is actually probably a good idea, because I may buy all those cards with the icons that let me buy cards, and then as we replenish the adventure area, the cards that we bought, a lot of cards with swords come out. Pretty much you had these two currencies. The swords are used to move faster across certain connections on the board, or at least to move across connections without getting damaged, or to buy certain cards. And now I bought all of those points that let me buy cards, and most of the cards in that line can be acquired only by defeating enemies, so that was not that great of an idea. So you have to work there. You can choose the type of quote-unquote currency that you want to invest in the most. Also, another thing is that certain game effects can be triggered only if you're playing a card that belongs to the same faction. Simply, they need to have a matching symbol. If you're playing a card that has an effect with a symbol next to it, you can use that effect if you played another card that has that symbol on top. And there are other games that have done this, But it also again means that from the beginning you can specialize in different things. And now I did a faction that specializes in boosting effects in a certain way and give me the certain type of effect. For example, is a faction that makes me very stealthy, allows me to remove a lot of Clank. Or I get other synergies of effects that let me kill a lot of enemies or let me get out of points by getting all those space dollars and so on and so forth. So from the beginning, you find a lot of different paths to increase your pool of resources and your engine. And I like that a lot. It makes the game feel fresh and very different from so many other deck builders out there. As it comes to moving on the board, then it may feel fiddly at the beginning just because there's so many things that you can do and the spaces work in so many different things. You have to remember what that space does and what the other space does. A minor complaint that I have is about the rulebook. There are just certain things that are not very clear. There's a section on the end which is pretty much like all that we should have told you earlier, but we didn't find a spot in the rulebook. And so there's this section for miscellaneous rules, and some are very important. So make sure that you take the time to read those, but then later when you're trying to look for them to double check things, you'll probably go to the main section about that thing and not to that miscellaneous section of stuff that I have no idea because it's there. And then certain things are simply not there. They're not addressed. They're just certain icons that you find on the board or on the tokens, and I didn't find them on the rulebook at all. But you can figure it out because there are similar icons on other cards, on other tokens, and so you can kind of like extrapolate that. It's a minor thing about the rules, but pretty much from what you have, you'll be able to extrapolate what is missing, and you'll become familiar with, okay, this card, this area is the market and works that way. This area lets me put a cube there. This area prevents me from moving further, and so on and so forth. And when you become familiar with it, and that just takes a couple of turns, mind you, then you have this very interesting maze of options to navigate, and you can choose to take more risks and take more punches in the face to go a certain way as opposed to go a little more cautious, take your time, collect more stuff, etc., etc. It's a very interesting space. It's a space that is brimming with possibilities, with opportunities, where so many times you're trading space for resources or vice versa. And also with players going around, especially when it comes to placing those cubes that you need to place to access the main area with the artifacts, and those spaces where you place the cubes, only one cube goes there. Then if other players start getting the cubes where you wanted to place them, then you have to take some potentially deadly detours, and that can be very problematic. So again, there is that very strong sense of indirect interaction, which again you do not have in many deck builders. In many deck builders, my engine is better than yours, my perfect deck is more perfect than yours, and this parallel race towards the same objective. Here I take resources that you may want. Here I'm taking those spaces that you were planning to take. That can be a problem for you. Here I'm dying. Yes. Dying can be a very good thing. If, for example, I'm gonna get knocked out, I'm gonna get knocked out next to the pots, so I still get to score my points. And from that moment on, I'm gonna start dumping attack on everybody. And if other people are still far, maybe they don't have the teleporters, they don't have an artifact yet, or just got it, then you're simply gonna be the only player that makes it out alive. To me, that is very interesting because actually it just adds a lot of interesting wrinkles to gameplay. It adds different paths to victory because there is a push or luck, a risk reward element here. But what is interesting is that there are different ways of handling that. That is, I may score not many points and then run to the pod, and then I trigger the final phase of the game in which there are more attacks, and I may simply be the last player alive. That's it. I don't need many points if everybody else is dead and they don't get to score. 1 point would be enough. But what if I plan to do so and actually the other people do manage to race out and make it out and get to score their points, and their points are better. So actually you have different ways of approaching the victory conditions, and they are legitimate. And then of course they may just switch from one to the other. I want to go for points, but you guys got all the good stuff. I'm gonna go for the accident and hope that I am the only one making it out alive. So there are ways of rushing the end of the game, but not to the point that you have the feeling that there is a snowball effect. I did lose a game precisely because of that, because I had a decent number of points, not many, but if I scored them, I may have made it. But that a player clearly run for the exit and started then doing all of those extra attack turns that the player that left the board can take. And I died that I almost made it. It was pretty exciting. I felt that I could have made it. Maybe it was a little bit unlucky. Maybe my gameplay wasn't optimal. The point is, I didn't feel that it was like, well, that is a game-breaking strategy. Get one artifact, rush out, and you win. Because maybe another player gets a bigger artifact, rushes out, you both count points, and that you lose. I like that. There are very different ways that you can approach things, and again it goes under the paragraph of indirect interaction. Dying or being knocked out can be the best thing. Being around in the game maybe not that great if indeed everybody's around and the players are still collecting more points than you are. What I do, what I don't do, how many hits I take, the artifacts that I collect, the resources that I take. Also, there's also on the market limited, so again there is that element there. The race for limited resources and space on the board, resources you can acquire, and the way in which the action of a player will affect the length of the game for everybody, those things all go together very well and make the game very tense and give a lot of variety to gameplay. Also, you look at the adventure deck, it's not one of those adventure decks that is the same 20 cards repeated a million times. There are just so many unique cards, so many different cards that do so many different things. In one game, you get some cards early on, you're basically playing a different game than if you take a set of other cards early on. One game I took cards that let me move stealthily and kill a lot of monsters, so then I was very carefree. Another game I had things that gave me more resources, and I was collecting points, and I would just be happy to make it out alive, because then I was hoping to win with a lot of points from there. Really, depending on the cards that you get, you have completely different gameplay, completely different strategic options. In other games, if I get the cleric and the ranger, or the cleric and the wizard, or the wizard and the ranger, they're just those options that I'm circling around, and more or less I know what to expect. Here, different synergies, unique cards, a lot of them really make the game highly replayable, and of course they give you a lot of interesting elements to analyze, which is part of what is fun in hobby games. Clank in space. I like it a lot. I like it so much to forgive the 3 exclamation marks in the title. Deck building and board game with very interesting, very intriguing, very addictive gameplay. You really are like, wow, let's play again, because this time I want to correct that one thing. But then it's so replayable in so many variations that you will not be playing the same game, in which you will change a different thing. You will be playing a vastly different game, and that is fun, and that is part of the fun. I'm curious now to try the fantasy version. That is one that came first, but I'm very, very pleased with Clank in space. It's fun, great replay value, a lot of indirect interaction, which is interaction, remember that. And just very, very fun, very captivating gameplay. Highly recommended. Clank in space, very good game.